Well, praise the Lord, everyone.
Praise the Lord.
It's good to see all of you here today. And we have 13 new district superintendents. And I think we'll see if you're all here. And then, of course, we said any other superintendent is welcome to come. So I see some veterans decide to come. But why don't we introduce ourselves, the new ones, and tell us who you are and where you are the superintendent of, so we'll know everybody here. So we'll start with you.
Tony Booyer, Colorado.
He's not quite new, but yes.
Jason McAllister, New Hampshire, Vermont.
Okay.
Tom Channel from Maine.
All right. Now here's a new one that's not a new one.
Dennis Anderson, Arkansas.
All right.
Brother Henry Andrade from New York Metro.
All right.
Sean Libby, Maryland, D.C., and I am very new.
All right. Go ahead and.
Eddie Gann, South Carolina.
Jeff Story, Texas District.
All right.
Ken McGreer, Canadian Plains.
David McCool, Secretary for Metro District, Metro Detroit District.
Okay. Detroit. Yes.
Ted Richmond, Detroit Metro.
All right.
Wayne Wyatt, North Central Jersey District.
Nate from Carrington from Texaco.
Steve Boyd from Florida.
All right.
Craig Warren, Washington.
Mark Williams, Iowa.
Stephen Beardsley, New Jersey, Delaware. And like Sean, I am very new.
Harold Linder, North Carolina. My wife Lisa, she does all the work.
Okay. Well, I guess you better know what's going on.
Gene Holly, North Texas.
Okay. So we're glad to have all of you here, and I think we're recording it so that we can have it for future reference. We have done this before for all superintendents, and then we've done it several years ago for new superintendents. But with 13 new ones this time, we felt it would be wise to do it again. And some of you have been in office several years, but we haven't done it specifically, so it's probably going to be helpful to you too. We're going to cover several matters, and we do have little booklets, so hopefully all of you got these 3 booklets. The strategies for growth is the first one. The role of the presbyter is the second one. And legal, judicial, and procedural matters for district boards is the third one. Now, all of these are on our minister's website, which is, we've newly revised it. Do you know the new address?
Ministers.upci.org.
So all these can be available digitally. I would really suggest that you download them for your district board, and maybe even sometime have a board orientation, because a lot of this has reference to your boards, and provide 2 of them in advance. But also, I think it'd be wise to build in some training, just like we try to do in our March board meeting. Build in some training on your district boards. You know, we deal with problems and issues. If we're not careful, the whole thing can be consumed with that, which can affect the character of your meeting. So if you block out a couple hours, even if you don't cover everything at one time, if you can, board meeting by board meeting, focus on a few things, I think that would help train your board members, but it also help maybe change the character of your meetings, give you a more positive or orientation towards the big picture. So we're going to try to talk about these 2 things, or 3 things. Brother Darrell Johns is the chair of the Strategic Growth Committee. Is he here? Or is he? Okay. And so he's going to come just in a moment. But the 3 main topics is the strategies for growth, which several years ago I presented to the General Board, and the General Board adopted this as a vision, and then we appointed a committee. But every district, we want them to have a plan for growth, and every nation of the world, we want to have a plan for growth. Now, some districts have just gone through the motions and given us a written plan. That's not really what we're wanting. It's not a plan from headquarters. We're wanting to challenge each district to look strategically at your needs, your opportunities, and develop your own plan. And we just want to know that you're doing it. It's really a general board initiative. When we started this several years ago, it was through discussion at first, and we had a mighty move of God, and the Lord spoke to us in our boardroom in tongues and interpretation and prophecy. And we had long-term honorary board members who said, we've never seen this happen on the general board. And so out of that, there were several prophecies. God wants to give us more than 1 million in North America. And I'm happy to tell you that we do. When you look at our constituents, we believe we are at more than 1 million. And also, we felt that one of the prophecies was the time is now. And another prophecy was there's a shift. And so, in response to that, the general board said, let's develop the strategic growth initiative. And the idea that each district would do this didn't come from me or from headquarters. It came from the board saying we want to hold ourselves accountable. We want to create a culture that every district is going to do their own thing, but every district is committed to this process. And so we're going to let Brother Johns tell you about it. And then the other things are not quite as exciting, but can be very important. The second part is the role of the presbyter, which really, to accomplish your vision, you got to have your presbyters on board. Right. And so that's why they can't be just maintenance men. They have to be driving the process, which is where training comes into play. And then the third one is legal, judicial, and procedural matters, which is probably probably your least favorite thing, but it can be very important. And even if you're an experienced minister, you probably haven't had to deal very much with that. And so, but the sad thing is you can have a great revival, and one horrible situation not handled properly can devastate your district. But even horrible situations, if handled properly, God can help us get through them and past them. And I can say that by experience. So Brother Johns, please come. He's our Assistant General Superintendent for the Eastern Zone. But more importantly for this purpose, he's the chair of our Strategic Growth Committee of the General Board.
Thank you, Brother Bernard. Good evening, afternoon, or wherever we are, depending on your time zone. It's good to see all of you. I have, maybe if I could get some help here. These are SGI district, there you go, thank you, Brother. I noticed you're focusing in on your dad a lot over at the camera. I'm standing back there watching you zoom in on him. I'm just kidding. So there are two things that just distributed. The first is a booklet, and the goal is to help you develop a strategy for your district for growth. And the second is a listing of cohorts. There's a couple pages, and I'll explain that just a little bit more maybe. So SGI is a standing committee of the General Board. We represent the General Board, Brother Bernard's vision, but as he just explained, this was something that the General Board felt was important for organization. We're working through a revision of our mission statement, but basically strengthen, grow, increase. That's what SGI does. We have an SGI journal that comes out every 2 months. It's a digital resource. You receive it from Brother Bernard's office. And then the Ministry Central, which is the online training platform for the UPCI. There are a lot of church growth materials there. Brother Darrell Weber is working with church growth. It has said revitalization. We're removing revitalization. Brother King Gurley is working with revitalization and retention with Ministry Central. So everything is there to try to help train people. There's a church growth checkup, a pastor's health checkup, and curriculum that comes behind that. We're a low budget operation to try to be frugal. This is not a parallel universe. We work with our department heads, ministry leaders. If you've been around the organization for a long time like me, superintendents have had initiatives. So this is an initiative, but it really has the strength of the General Board behind it, and it's a standing committee of General Board members. So our goal is collaborative. It's not so much authoritative, but it's to help you in what you're doing in your district. So Brother Parkey works with strategic growth plans and the cohorts. Brother Bernard has been gracious to give us time to train in the March meeting, and then also to have a luncheon for a couple of hours where you meet in your cohort group to collaborate on your strategic plans. We'd like to have plans presented this coming March. Some of you that are new may need to go back and see if there's a plan already existing. If you were on the district board, you may know that, or start working on a plan, and you can interact with Brother Parkey as much as you need to, and he'll help you. He is a fantastic district superintendent. He's a full-time superintendent. He has nothing else to do but focus on the Missouri district. and to help you. He exists to help you, as a matter of fact. I'm sure he would tell you this. He's right next door in our meeting that has food. I noticed there's none here, and I was going to invite you over, but we have too much. Ken Gurley is working on church health and retention, and he's doing a phenomenal job, and I'm not want to go down into too much detail there. And we've worked a lot with NAM, who has great resources, and the other people on our committee. The committee right now is myself, Brian Parkey's vice chair, Nathan Scoggins, secretary, Ken Gurley, Morel Cornwell, Steve Hansen, Galen Cantrell, Daryl Weber, Brent Caltharp, Scott Sistrunk, Brock Chavis, Dave Henry, and John Burdett. So that's all you need to know about SGI for now. My main assignment today is to go through the booklet that you have called Strategies for Growth by Brother Bernard. I did something similar recently where I took a 1,000-page document and distilled it down to 5 minutes, something like that, not really. So Brother Graham and Brother Bernard have trusted me to try to do this. So I'm going to give you a quick tour of the booklet that you're holding in your hand. Is there another physical copy of that? I probably don't have. I have pages marked, and if the pages are the same, then it will work. So the purpose of what I'm going to do right now is just to familiarize yourself. As a superintendent, you get so much information. No matter how intelligent you are or organized you are, it's a lot. It's a whole lot. And so at least if you know that this is a resource for you, you can go to it and memorize it or go to the parts of it that you really need. When I became district superintendent, it was a little overwhelming in Georgia. And my first assignment was to address 5 licensed ministers who had preached for a church that was out of fellowship. And so I had to go to those 5 licensed ministers and tell them that the Georgia district told me as the new superintendent that if they didn't write a letter of apology, we were going to file charges against them. And my board was very happy to ask me to do that at that time. Literally the first thing right away. And then we had a contention with the church board and the pastor that we had to call them in. So I got thrown in to the deep end of the pool. And the main reason I'm saying that is, as a district superintendent, maybe not in your district, but in a lot of districts I'm aware of, there's a lot of problems that you have to manage and deal with. And if you own a campground, you've got that to deal with. And there's always a problem to solve or a situation that you have to address. And it just inherent with this job, it will consume you till there's nothing left for what we're really called to do, which is to take the whole gospel to the whole world by the whole church. So Brother Bernard's brilliance as a leader is to try to make sure we leverage our mission, that we don't let our general board meetings devolve into just solving problems. We've got to make sure that we do what we're really called to do. And I just want to reinforce by the manual and by our biblical mandate that as a district superintendent, you're charged. And when I was a district superintendent, I was charged with trying to advance the mission of the church and not just keep my head above water and solve problems and deal with people that are immoral and turning in their card. There's a lot of that. There's way too much of that, God help us. Or a lawsuit, God forbid, right? But in the middle of all of that, if God will help us, we need to kind of work our way out of the mire and make sure that we're focused on strategies for growth. So that's what this is about. So on high level, page 2, spirit-led leadership. We are not politicians. We are not governing agencies. We're men of God, and we're leading by a vision. So I'm just going to touch on the sections that Brother Bernard has here. This spiritual side is really so important, and a few months into being a district superintendent, I told my wife one day, I don't know if God is slowing me down or the devil is fighting me, but I feel like I'm flying into a headwind. There's some things I'm really not good at. There's other things that I'm pretty good at. and I couldn't get to the things that I'm good at. I said, I can do this kind of thing in my sleep, and I cannot get it done. So above everything, this is a spiritual work, and we are spiritual leaders. And as part of being a district superintendent, I think it is super important that you cast vision. Now, I'm a pastor, so I have probably 100 opportunities a year, Sundays, Wednesdays, plus meetings that we have monthly to talk to our church and advance the mission. As a district superintendent, you may have 2 or 3 official touches a year, and I would recommend that you have an opportunity to actually preach. In our district, there was no set time for the district superintendent to preach to the entire district. So how can you lead with vision if you're never projecting that vision? It's not about whether you're a good preacher, a bad preacher, or they need to hear your sermon. As the leader, you have to have a platform to cast vision. So I tracked, and we had sectional conferences and sectional summits. And I made sure that in every one of those meetings, I had time. It might have only been 10 minutes to talk about the vision, which is the mission of the church that we were trying to accomplish. So please cast vision for what could be, what should be. That's what you want to try to do, is put that district on a trajectory of growth and revival. So that's a picture of a preferable future, and trying to lead the district. So proactive leadership. I'm going through Brother Bernard's booklet now. Not reactive, but proactive. Anticipate challenges, a culture of discipleship. So you want to be a proactive leader, not always reacting to all the problems that are going to come up and come to you. You need to have an agenda. When I say an agenda, a plan of what you believe God has asked you to do in the district. Now, that can't happen without communication, and communication is so important. This is different than a church. I know you know this, but in case you don't, you're not the pastor of your district. You're not the prophet of your district. Those men and women that are in your district who are licensed ministers, they actually think they hear from God too. And I think if you try to lead them like a pastor or like a prophet, you are headed for failure. So you have to address those ministers differently than you do even in a local church. And I would hope that I treat the people in our church with a lot of respect. But these ministers, it's a different animal and a different kind of leadership. Brother Bernard has an excellent section on the tone, how you communicate with your district leaders, and because you may only have a few times that you meet with them, make them count and create other ways. There are a lot of districts now that are having monthly training sessions and bringing in speakers, a way to accelerate the vision. On page 3, he talks about building relationships. It's similar to what I've already said, but through trust, through relationships. A district superintendent can appeal to any minister in the district. You're allowed to do that by your role as a district superintendent. So you have a platform to communicate with the ministers in your district, whether they're pastors or not. And if it was not a pastor, I always went through their pastor, even though they were a licensed minister. If they were not an elected official, I tried to go through the pastor. So there's a great section there. On page 4, there's a section about training leaders. And to me, this starts in children's camps, youth camps, if you have a hyphen camp, every opportunity possible. What about tagging on to your camp meetings and other events that you already have and leverage training there? Page 4 is a focus on the mission, carrying the whole gospel to the whole world by the whole church. So in your area as a district superintendent, that's part of what we do. Page 4 also talks about, and if the pages are off, I'm working off a PDF. Respect people, church leaders, church government. Make sure that you are accountable, you operate ethically. As a district superintendent, you're not a king, so you need to make sure. And I was elected by 3 votes, I think, 3 votes. So I had a very narrow margin, if that's what you're looking at. So it was good for me, because I made sure that we didn't do anything without the district board discussing it and voting on it. And once I established that, I kind of stuck with that to make sure that I was not a lone voice in the district, but that I had the support of the district board, and I'm not patting myself on the back. I had to, and so then I thought you should, right? Delegate and empower. Once again, you're not the lone leader. These are other duly elected leaders in your district, and so you should work with them and through them. Page 6 is about core values while being open to change. I think it's important to drive the message and the mission deep into the ground. It is a fixed stake, like the this and that leadership lesson I've taught. But then be open to change. And if you don't have a culture of change, you need to assure people that if we change a method, we're not changing the message and we're not changing the mission. Brother Bernard has an excellent session on that. Page 7 is be knowledgeable. So this could be a really long section. You're going to hear more about this later. But the manual, Robert's Rules of Order, working knowledge of judicial procedure, favorite homework assignment. But really, you have great resources in Brother Graham and Brother Bernard. We have people on a judicial procedure committee. Well, they will help you, but it's so important that you cannot be a rookie forever. I don't mean to say that in a demeaning way, but you have to learn, and there's a lot to learn if you're a new superintendent. How to lead a meeting. I've been to a lot of places, not as many as some others, but how to run a district conference, how to run a board meeting, how to run a sectional conference with agendas. That's our responsibility as district superintendents, to get up to speed, to know how to run those meetings. And if you need somebody that's like an elder, that's got a lot of experience, to be your parliamentarian, to sit on the platform and help you if you stub your toe or make a mistake, fine, do that. But it's really important that you get up to speed on leading. The next section is on accountability. And there's a whole thing about that we, especially with finance, with reimbursements, with the decisions you make, with keeping minutes and records, and all of that, you probably have a district policy. We operate by the manual and the Bible. There's a whole section on planning for growth. So, SWOT analysis, Brother Bernard goes through that. Goal setting, page 9, establishing measurable goals for your district in collaboration with your board, and a meeting perhaps with all of your department heads, so that you sit together and you do a SWOT analysis and you discuss, and you do this in a collaborative fashion, so at the end of the day you're all on the same page, you're all trying to do the same thing together. There are some things that you should start, there are some things that you should probably kill, and you can read Necessary Endings by Henry Cloud to read more about that. Page 9 is a plan of action. I know you're intelligent people, but this plan of action, I'm not trying to go down into every detail. That's why I didn't mean that in a sarcastic way. So I'm not trying to read every line. It would be here forever. There's a whole section on assessment and adjustment. You hear more about that in the board meetings this week, and on Thursday from Catherine Groves, the importance of trying to get stats. In our district, it was very difficult for us to get average attendance, record attendance, but if you can establish that in your district, it's super important. There's a section on pages 9 and 10 about committee and board meetings, and I'll say a few things in summary fashion. Plan ahead, really prepare, review the minutes of the previous meeting so that you can address anything that comes up. Build margin into those meetings for appointments. Sometimes people are sitting outside waiting on you. I like to build margin in appointments so that if someone is scheduled for a time, you can take care of some other business while they could be on schedule, instead of them waiting for endless hours to meet the board. That leaves a bad taste in their mouth. Sometimes it happens and you can't help it. Treat every candidate, every departmental leader with respect. Even though you're the superintendent and you're the board, we serve them. That's our role. We have authority, but we use that authority to serve them. I think you should be warm and congenial when possible, and tough only when necessary. There's a thing in there about minutes. And then a thing that I think is really important. In a board meeting, there's the beginning of the board meeting, there's the heart of the board meeting, and there's the end of the board meeting when everybody's exhausted. I appreciate Brother Bernard putting the heart of our agenda in the heart of our meeting. when you kind of get in the meeting and you get refreshed, you get in the room and take care of routine things. And then whatever is your best day, I'm going to call it prime time. That's when you need to deal with vision and future and strategy, when you feel like your board is at their best. Encourage discussion, diverse perspectives. Don't run over people. And I don't know if I can say the word pirate, but it means you win, but you really lost. It's kind of like a dog can kill a skunk, but it's not worth it. So don't die on hills that you wish you hadn't have died on. Frame the discussion, but don't control it. Don't manipulate it. Allow room. I want to say a quick thing, not in this amazing document that rises nearly to the level of Scripture, but we did something on speaker selection, that we have a speaker pool for all of our events, and anybody can put a speaker's name on there. And then when we voted on a speaker for a meeting, we did a weighted vote. My first choice gets 3 votes, second choice gets 2. And then when that decision is made, there's no bloodshed, and you can advocate for a speaker, but a secret ballot vote. That seemed to work for us in Georgia. There's a whole section on growing a district, which is the heart of what Brother Bernard really is, his passion as a general superintendent. And so, high level, make the case for growth, page 13. Create a climate for growth. Change the conversation, talk about growth, right? And then change from turf protection to ministerial ethics. In my document, page 16. In other words, we're not just trying to own a city. I would not want to be responsible for being the only church in a metro area, 6 or 8 million people. I need everybody pitching in. So foster daughter church concept. Brother Bernard talks about Florida starting 50 churches in 2 years because they had a collaborative effort. They changed the policy for approving daughter churches and new church plants. They changed the conversation. They changed the culture. Page 17, foster a kingdom approach. Not my kingdom, but God's kingdom. And we're all in this together. And he makes a lot of tremendous points in this booklet about the collaborative effort in daughter churches that do not stop church growth. There's enough for everybody. Have a predisposition, page 18. Again, the page numbers may be off, to approve new works, and I've somewhat mentioned that. There's an entire section, it starts on page 19, about growing a district, developing a culture of growth. He talks about 5 approaches to evangelism. Brother Bernard has preached this for many years, but Bible studies, home friendship groups, preaching points, daughter churches, self-governing churches, it's a win at any level, and if that church matures, then it becomes a self-governing church. Seek opportunities for growth, pages 21 and 22, looking for areas, counties, cities, unreached areas in your state that you can pray for and target. In Georgia, we have a lot of small counties, so I asked us to claim counties and go to the courthouse and pray that God would send someone to start a church in that county because we had a lot of unchurched counties. A culture of growth, changing the conversation. And he's got a lot of statistics. A culture, on page 23, of diversity. Now, I did the district conference in Maine with you, Brother Channel, and I looked at your demographics. You have like a high population of Caucasians in Maine. That's different than in Georgia, right? So you got to know your state, but we're here to reach everybody, and we shouldn't be targeting one demographic, whether it is race, culture, age, young, old, male, female. As a district superintendent, you want to have a culture of diversity to reach everybody you can. And Brother Bernard gives 4 reasons to reach all those cultures that are outstanding, but I'm not going to read them for the sake of time. Great section on diversity and who you put on platforms, you can't elect a person of color or of a different culture. That's not up to you, but you can find a way to involve people so that your district leadership, your district platform looks like your constituents in your state. There's a whole section, page 25, a strategy for growth, and he goes into a lot of detail of identifying population centers, target areas, and then sectional plans and goals. It really drills down to this. Recruiting, I'm now on page 27, recruiting and training ministers at every level. So at youth camp, you can have classes if you feel a call to preach or you think you feel a call to preach, and you start there in a licensure track. And then local, moving to general to ordination, that you try to keep people moving till they're fully vested in the organization. Page 28 is adopting policies for growth. This goes back to, making it easy to start churches and to do what you really need to do. And then recording, page 28, and celebrating results. If you do all of this, but then you go to camp meetings and district conferences and don't talk about it, and at first maybe not a lot is going on, but I've learned to put wood where the fire is. If you've got one or two people in your district that are really doing what you're trying to preach, celebrate it. Make that the biggest thing in the world, and it will grow from there, even though you may not have a majority in the middle. There's a whole section that relates to churches, because I've been asked to do some sessions on ministerial ethics, and it seems like this is a big deal. So pages 29 and 30, Brother Bernard points to the book, Spiritual Leadership in the 21st Century. He has an excellent section in that book about transfers and how to walk through that, and it's really excellent, and he has an excerpt of that in this document as well. And cautious acceptance, danger of building a church on transfers. Page 31 is also from another book, Leadership in the 21st Century, about growing a church. It's the Austin story here. It's about how they started in their home and grew the church and grew daughter churches, and the daughter churches never slowed down the growth of New Life Austin. And he goes through several important facets of building a church, and I'm not going to go through them for the sake of time, but they're in my notes and they're very powerful. And he has a whole section on 38 of attracting, winning, and retaining people. This is mainly focused on local churches, but it's also a feature of a district. And then there's a summary at the end. So I think I might have went a couple minutes overboard. I forgot to look at my starting time. So my purpose was to give you a quick tour of this booklet. It is fantastic, and it points you to other resources and books that will help you. I don't have time for questions, but you can ask Brother Bernard. But here's the main thing. I think I started off with this, and I feel like I served as superintendent 9 years, and I feel like I moved the needle just a little bit. But I asked the Lord to help me cast vision everywhere I went, and I had 5 things in Georgia Harvest that I was focused on. And I look back, I grade myself pretty hard, and I want to just encourage you that you might have an overnight turnaround in success. You might be leading a district that is already moving in the right direction. But if you're in a place that you feel like it's stuck, just keep working at it and don't give up. And remember that ultimately this is spiritual, and that God will use you to lead your district. I believe that an election is not just a choice of man, that God is at work. And if you will lean on him, he will help you. And all of us are here to try to help you. But I will tell you that Brother Graham and Brother Bernard are knowledgeable at every level of this organization. And I encourage you to call them day or night. Thank you very much.
I know he's pressed for time.
No, I'm trying to
But
be good.
Get them up to date on the SGI, those 3 components. Make sure they understand that.
So strengthen our churches, grow our churches, and increase the number of ministers, right, and churches. So according to what we've learned in statistics lately, we're not losing our new churches. We're losing churches. And Brother Gurley, this is kind of what he's really been focused on. He just earned a doctorate in retention and revitalization, and he's working with SGI, and he's helping us a lot. But in the 15 to 20 year range, that's where we're losing our churches. We seem, and they know this better, but we seem to be losing churches where a pastor might have gone in and started a church. He was bivocational. He was the largest supporter, but now he's at retirement age. And no one can come in and take that church because they cannot afford to come in and take that church if the pastor leaves or no longer pays tithes into the church. I also think, this is an opinion, that it's a disservice to never take a salary from the church, never take income from the church, because you're teaching the church to not support a pastor, and maybe that works for you, but it will not work for the future. It should be built on a biblical model. So we really need a lot of strength there. Succession planning, we need to be ready. There is the graying of the UPC. Is the average age of our ministers still 52? Median age. Median age is 52. I will be 70 next month. It's hard to believe. I was General Youth President 3 weeks ago, you know? But it's happening, right? So we have to be focused on the next generation and raising up leaders. And I mentioned this, but I think it starts at children's camps, at youth camps, training programs in local churches, and in raising up that next. So strengthen, grow, increase, SGI. We're trying to align our mission of SGI. That's kind of what Brother Bernard has asked me to lead, but that's just one facet of our organization.
Okay.
Anything else? Okay.
I know this is like drinking from a fire hydrant, but at least you're getting started. Thank you, Brother John.
You know, this is my longtime friend. I don't have to say something kind, so he'll be my friend. But I thank God for Brother Bernard, because he does not have a caretaker mentality. And with all the junk that he has to deal with, we need to support him and pray for him. But I thank God that he has never lost the focus of leading this organization to growth. I thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Brother Johns. So I really hope that you'll hear more, and in March we'll have more time to talk about strategic growth. But what we do is we break up into cohorts based on the size of the district, and we have time to talk about what's working in your district, what's not working, comparing notes. And so, but I don't want you to wait till then. We want to hit the ground running. So strength, and how do we strengthen those existing churches? And I think a lot of it is the succession planning, the retirement planning even. Getting ministers to join the MRF, the Ministers Retirement Fund, if they don't have their own retirement plan. And then grow. You know, if our churches are struggling, they're not going to be interested in planting other churches. But if they're healthy and strong, then they start thinking about doing something else. And so that's where, from a district level, now we respect the self-governance of each local church. So we have to be careful there. We're not walking in some church telling them what to do. But if we can have some strategies that we present to the district of how to strengthen local churches and how to emphasize transition and healthy transition, it's about changing the conversation, the culture, so that a minister my age is thinking, okay, who's going to be my successor, and how do I plan for my successor? When am I going to retire, and how am I going to plan for that? But if nobody's talking about it, it's easy to go by what everybody's done 20 years ago or 50 years ago. But if you're talking about it, at least you're not forcing them to do anything, but you're helping move the culture. And then, of course, how do we increase the number of churches and ministers? And there's where your strategic growth plan really comes in, targeting your needy areas for additional churches. So, okay, now we're shifting gears, but it's still along the same line. I think you have a booklet, so I need to talk about the role of the presbyter, right? The role of the presbyter. And Brother Gurley's in this room. He helped us do this, so we might get some input from him as well. But there is a great job description for the presbyter in the UPCI manual under General Board Policies. And let me just back up and say, you need to familiarize yourself with the manual. There's the General Constitution, there's the District Constitution, there's the local church government, which is it's a sample. But if you'll notice carefully, it's the default if the church does not have their own bylaws. So if you're going in there to set a church in order, or maybe you have to elect a new pastor, obviously you have to see what their bylaws are. But many times they don't have bylaws, or they forgot them, or they don't know if they have them or not. So then you could say the local church government in the UPCI manual is your bylaws. Until such time as you would vote in something different, we're going to go by this. These are your bylaws. So obviously you need to be familiar with those bylaws. But then what we did when I became superintendent, we added general board policies, because there are a lot of policies over the years passed by the general board, but nobody knows what they are because they're not accessible. And then we've developed a lot of structure, a lot of additional things in the last however many years But if you have to put everything in the Constitution, that means if you want to change anything, you have to wait a year, go to the General Conference, and then you got to explain in a few minutes some complicated thing, the reason why you're wanting to add something or change something, and then you run the risk of somebody jumps up with an amendment that totally wipes out what you're trying to accomplish. And so it'd be better for your big statements to be in the Constitution, but your detailed policies to be approved by the General Board. That means they can be changed from time to time as you experiment. Of course, the General Conference rules supreme. If the ministers don't like a policy, they're free to submit a resolution and overturn any General Board policy we have or amend it or whatever. But this gives us a structure that isn't dependent upon waiting once a year and trying to get 2,000 or 1,500 ministers to understand what you're dealing with on an operational basis. And so those general, but it's also in the manual, so that way any minister can see. It's not hidden. Why are we operating the way we're operating? Well, it's in the manual. We're not trying to hide it. We're not trying to pull one over you. But so you need to familiarize yourself with that, because a lot of times over the years there have been judgment calls. There's a statement in the manual of what to do, but we have to apply that. And so we come to the General Board and say, what's the interpretation? What's the official? Instead of each district doing a different, having a different interpretation, let's all do it the same way. So we make a General Board policy. Instead of trying to go back and amend the Constitution, we just say, this is how the General Board understands that this will be followed. So you really do need to look at those policies, because they will govern in the absence of a change in the Constitution, of course. And then we have the position papers. Some of them were adopted by the General Conference, many by the General Board. And these are usually on doctrinal or holiness issues. And again, you need to know they're there, because lots of times if we need to prove to somebody what we believe, well, they say, well, that's not in the Articles of Faith, but it's in our position papers of the UPCI. And once again, I would say, sure, if our ministers don't like it, they can submit a resolution to the General Conference to amend it. But until they do that, those General Board policies are the official position of the UPCI on these various matters. And then the last section is resources for local churches. And that will help when setting up a new church, but also it's intended as a checklist for existing churches, because many churches, if not most churches, don't have all the policies they should have. And we have separate for the U.S. and separate for Canada. And this is a great resource to help a small church, a new church, a struggling church, a church that has a pastoral change. This is a great time to get your house in order. This is a great time to get all the policies in place. And most of it can be passed by a church board. This is a great time to get some things fixed that have never been fixed. But you need to know all these things. So in the middle of that, the General Board policies, there is district presbyter job description. So you should familiarize yourself with this and train your district board. So here's the thing. The district board, the presbyters, operate under the direction of the district superintendent. So in the manual, it's really the district superintendent who is administrating the district. Sometimes in larger districts, some presbyters feel like they're a law unto themselves. They really they're elected by their section, but they can't really do district business in opposition to or without communicating or consulting with and cooperating with the district superintendent. So, for example, in many bigger districts, we allow the presbyter to handle the pastoral transitions, but they're doing so as delegated by the district superintendent. So they're not supposed to just go do that on their own. At minimum, they should be consulting you before they proceed with a pastoral selection process. You should be in the loop. And if you say, handle it, that's great. But they shouldn't just presume that, and they should not do it without your knowledge and consent. So in a nice way, you tell them that. But of course, the presbyter can appeal to any minister in his section for information or cooperation. The district superintendent can appeal to any minister in his district. So that's important, because we respect local church government, the self-governance of the local church. We respect the authority of the pastor. So there's this issue, well, what if there's a minister in a church? Can I even talk to them? Do I have to go through their pastor? Well, you do want to abide by pastoral ethics, but you do have a right on district business. You do have a right to talk to any minister about matters affecting the district. And while if there's a problem, we would obviously want to make sure the pastor's in the loop. We don't want to counsel someone in their personal life without their pastor's knowledge and all that. But sometimes a pastor is so like what if a minister in a church inquires, I hear there's a church open. Is there a church open? Where should I send my resume? Do you tell them? Well, I would say yes, because that's district business. And if a pastor says, well, I didn't want them to know, you say, well, why did you approve them for ministerial credentials if you don't want them to know the business of the district? You know, that's part of what you're allowing them to do, is interact with your organization. Now, we don't want to give them pastoral counseling. We don't want to undermine your authority, but they are a minister of the UPCI. They're in good standing with their district and national organization. So we will answer ministerial questions. We will relate to them on a ministerial basis. We are assuming and believing that the pastor has approved that. We're not trying to go against the pastor. We're assuming you wanted him to have that relationship, or you would never have approved him to come to the board for credentials. So it can be a delicate balance and a judgment call. But basically, we do say that the president has the right to appeal to any minister in the district section, and the superintendent has the right to appeal to any minister in the district, obviously on matters of concern of the district. Okay, so but the president serves in cooperation with and under the oversight of the district superintendent. But in larger districts especially, it's probably a good idea to let the president handle a lot of these cases of, unless there's an unusual situation, to let them handle the pastoral selection process of securing candidates and resumes and presiding over the vote for the pastor and so forth and so on. And we do have in the the district superintendent's handbook and also the district secretary's handbook, we have all kinds of documents of how you go through to do that. For example, the pastoral selection process. But the main thing I'm trying to emphasize is the president should work very closely in communication with the district superintendent and with their section. And I think Brother John just stated, you're not the pastor of your district, and the president is not the pastor of the section. I'm not the pastor of the UPCI. Don't want to be. But I think that's too much responsibility. I don't want to be liable for it. But the communication is another matter, okay? A good district superintendent is going to communicate with his pastors. You need to know what they're doing, what they're not doing, if they're going through a problem, if they're not showing up, not in an authoritative way, not as their pastor, but as their friend and advisor and their district official. And the same with the president. The president should know the pastors and should be in regular communication with them, whether officially, events of the section, events of the district, or informally. How are you doing? Haven't seen you in a while, just checking on you. I heard this, your mom passed away, or whatever the case may be. I think that goes a long way to creating a fellowship that's not just an organization, but a fellowship of ministers and pastors. Okay, so that's very important. But one thing I think you have to emphasize, and this is why I suggested earlier, that you need to spend part of your district board meetings for planning, for vision casting, for church growth, for SGI. So the discussion. What's happening with some of our churches that are struggling to survive? What's happening with those who are losing? What can we do to come alongside and help? And you could strategize. You could say, there's a little church and section that's getting ready to go under. Is there a senior pastor in a neighboring town who could take that in as a daughter work, or if not a daughter work, at least just oversee it, maybe be elected as the pastor, maybe send some young preachers there until we get it back on and see what can we do? So you're strategizing about strength. Then you strategize about growth. How can we help our churches that are 50 and 75 grow to 100? Do we need to bring in maybe have a district growth conference, or have a sectional growth conference, or what can we do? So your district board can talk about these things. And then of course increase. How can we strategically increase the number of churches? Where are the target areas? The under-churched areas as well as the unchurched areas. It's not just where there's no church, but where we need more churches for the population. How can we create a culture where teenagers feel called to preach, and eventually maybe get their Christian workers license under their, or Christian ministry license under their pastor. Then they get localized. So your board you can have ideas, but maybe, or you might even point subcommittees, but your board just brainstorms and strategizes, comes up with some ideas. But then what you have to explain to your board is your main job is not maintenance. Now, understand well, I was a president in the Texas district, which was the largest district in the UPCI. And then I was a district superintendent of the South Texas district. I served under Brother Holly, and also I served under Brother Kilgore. And so I kind of know what the role of the president is like. And according to a lot of preachers, the best president is the one that leaves them alone. It doesn't talk to them, doesn't bother them, doesn't interfere with them, doesn't ask for anything. That's the best president. That's the one they want to vote for. The non-threatening president is not going to steal saints in their church, but if somebody else is stealing saints, they'll come in there and tell them to stop. And otherwise, just leave me alone. But really, your president, so it's very tempting for a president to be in maintenance mode. And if they really want their office, it's tempting to be a politician and just please everybody by doing nothing. But that's not really worth it. I think you have to challenge your presbyters. If you really feel like God has called you in this position, it's got to be for some reason beyond just making everybody happy. Obviously, we don't want to offend anybody. Obviously, we do want to enforce ministerial ethics. And obviously, we want to be the first ones to practice ministerial ethics and not use our position for selfish reasons. But I would say one of the main reasons for being a presbyter is to foster growth in that section. And so think about it this way. Each pastor is rightly focused on their field of labor. They should be. But who advocates for the unchurched cities in your section? If it's not the presbyter, who's it going to be? And if there's one church in a city of 100,000, who's going to advocate for another church? It's probably not going to be the pastor that's there, unless he's a visionary himself and wants to start daughter works, in which case that's great. But if the presbyter doesn't have a burden, I remember when I was a president in the Texas district, Brother Story, I had 35 counties that didn't have a church in my section. And I had a burden for that. It was overwhelming. Our section was bigger than the state of Ohio. Our section had more saints, or not saints, but more population than the state of Arkansas. So I'm looking at the list of counties, and 35 don't have one church. Well, the pastor in San Antonio doesn't have time to worry about that. If I don't worry about that, who's going to? And so somehow we've got to get our presidents to think about the whole district and about their section. We obviously don't want to hurt existing churches. We want to strengthen them. We want to be their friend. We want to be their supporter. We want to protect ministerial ethics. But at the same time, the presbyter has to have a vision that goes beyond just each local pastor. And I think that's what we're trying to instill. And of course, by working together with the district board, we can have a vision for the whole district. So it's not just a lone presbyter out there, but it's all of the presbyters together create a culture of growth for your district. And here's what I saw over the years. The district board is the key to growth. For better or for worse. Because you could have a general superintendent that says we're going to double in a decade. But how is that going to happen? You have to have more churches. How do you get more churches? District boards have to approve them. So if the district boards don't approve them, all the rhetoric from headquarters and all the programs and all the money that North American Missions raises is going to get stuck in a bottleneck. Or let's say you have a passionate North American Missions director. He wants revival. He wants growth. He's not even on the district board in most cases. Well, if the district board just sits on the application, that damn director's will beat his head against the wall and you're not going to grow. So somehow the district board has to believe in growth. And so what I found that we had to do is change the culture. And Brother John's mentioned it briefly, but the predisposition has to be we want more churches. So I know in an old established district, what can maybe subconsciously be the attitude is somebody comes, and maybe this has changed. Maybe this is partly culture, maybe it's partly generational. But I remember when I was a new president, it seemed like our board's way of dealing with, here comes this applicant that's scared to death. They're young. They maybe were never pastored before. They feel a passion for a church. and maybe their pastor from 10 years ago wished they'd never left that church. They were still in that local church, did not really want them to be a preacher, but they had a good track record for 10 years. They've done a good job. So they come with trepidation before the board, and there's another church 10 or 20 or 30 miles away, and so that pastor's already told the pastor, I don't want a church. And that old pastor from 10 or 20 years ago says, well, they didn't really follow my advice when they were a young preacher. And so this young preacher comes up, and he's applying, and he gets blasted. Well, why didn't you obey your pastor 10 years ago? Do you know anybody in that area? Well, he probably does, or did you grow up in that area? I remember we had a pastor who said, we ought to make a rule. If you grew up in an area, you can never come back to pastor because you know people. You know people in that area. And I'm saying, well, that's exactly the wrong advice. I want people that know the area. But that was his philosophy. You should go somewhere else and bring in a stranger that will probably not be successful. And so, you could... And I remember telling our board, look, remember when you were a young preacher, somebody had to let you go. And did you ever make a mistake 10 years ago or 20 years ago? Every one of us did. If we're going to sit on the board of elders and point out everything we did wrong 10 or 20 years ago, nobody would ever get approved for anything. So let's change the paradigm. We want more churches. Let's identify the areas that need them. And if there's a person that's qualified, that loves God, who believes the doctrine, who believes in revival, who's got a track record of winning souls, who's been ethical, who's got a good report from their pastor, it should be a slam dunk. It should be a predisposition for approval. Now, if something comes up where they're not ethical, and one thing we can ask them. Now, there's several churches in your area. If someone visited from another church, how would you handle that? Just tell us right now. That can be very helpful a year from now, when you can remind them of their answer. And then another question we like to ask was, if we approved you now, this is an area of several churches, if we approved you now, what if 6 months or a year from now, another person wanted to apply in the same area? What would your opinion be at that time? Well, they're all going to say, fine. And so sometimes we remind them a year from now that you were already in agreement. But the point is, you're changing the culture and the conversation towards church growth and church planting. But you have to help your presbyters understand your job is not just maintenance of your section. Your job is growth of your section and growth of your district. Now, I didn't cover all the routine things that a presbyter does, but you can read the job description that's in the general board policies. And I think you do a little training on that, and you see the booklet. I think you all have the booklet, so that booklet will walk you through it. But I wanted to emphasize that main thing of it's the district board that is the bottleneck or the key to growth. All that SGI, strengthening struggling churches, growing existing churches, and we know obviously the pastor is the key person there. But the district can create the culture and increasing the number of ministers and churches. That's really the district board is going to make or break that district. And the presbyters are your district board. So you're the leader, but as Brother John said, you're leading preachers, and they all hear from God for themselves. So you've got to subtly explain that, yes, they've all heard from God, but you're the one that puts all what they heard from in harmony with a grand vision. And of course, the goal is of a good leader is that they all adopt the vision and think it's their vision. And so you let them talk about it, you let them modify it, you let them change things, even though your idea is obviously going to be better, but you let them go ahead and change some things because it becomes their idea, it becomes their vision, it becomes their plan, and then they're going to execute. I've seen great leaders, I've even seen general superintendents have a great plan, but if their people start raising questions, they just shut it off, and I can see the other leaders in the room thinking, okay, I'm not going to oppose you because you're my leader, but if you depend on me to get it done, I'll just let somebody else get it done. And so you want their buy-in, because ultimately you can't do your job unless your presbyter support you. So you have to motivate the individual presbyter, but collectively the presidents, you have to get their buy-in, because to be successful, ultimately you need them. And they've got to embrace these things as their own ideas. If you just come back from the general board all excited and say, we're going to do this, and you haven't laid the foundation for the presidents, then they're going to say, okay, brother superintendent, we believe you, and praise God, bless God, go ahead, please do it. But they're not going to be the ones to help you do it. And obviously you want their support. Okay. So now we go to the really exciting part. So I think, Brother Graham, you're gonna start this one off.
Judicial procedure.
I know, it's everybody's favorite topic. I don't expect in the next 25, 30 minutes for all of you to become experts on this subject by any means. However, I want to give you just a broad overview in some kind of broad stripes that may help in some regards. First of all, I would have you recognize this. There are three different types of procedures governed in the judicial procedure. Three different types of actions that are there. They are segmented in the judicial procedure in separate articles to keep them clean. I took a call from a district superintendent not terribly long ago, and he was saying, I'm a little confused because this says this and this says this, but he was pulling clauses from two different articles for two different procedures. They didn't harmonize with each other because they don't govern the same process. So I would point out to you there are three. They are in separate articles. The first is a grievance. That is a conflict between two ministers. The kind of classic example of that is succession plans or retirement benefits. He promised me he was going to give me $1,000 a month until Jesus comes back, and now he's not, and I have a grievance against him. It is for a conflict between two ministers. He sold me a car. He knew it was a lemon. I want my money back. Those kinds of things, because Corinthians would tell us you can't take them to court, so where do you get this resolved? That is for a conflict between two ministers. Now, sometimes the guy will say, well, I'm going to file a complaint against him because he's unethical. He's not paying me my money. And while there might be some, in one man's mind, an ethical component or conduct that they would deem unbecoming to a minister underlying the grievance, still at its core, it's a conflict between two ministers which should be resolved by a grievance. Let me say that when a matter is brought to you, you do have some latitude to try to guide them into the right procedure. You have that latitude and are actually encouraged to do that. So that is first, it's a grievance. It is covered in Article 3. The district board of the district is not directly involved in the resolution of a grievance. It is handled outside your district board unless one of the parties appeals the decision of the arbitration panel. But you can read the process there. I'm going to offer you, I should have done this first. In terms of judicial procedure matters, it is vital that you be familiar with that manual. And I know this old joke about, Emmanuel, God with us, the Emmanuel, God help us. I get it. But it is important that you know it. It is important that you be familiar with it. It is your Bible for these matters. Our legal protection is found in following those processes and following them consistently and applying them uniformly across different situations. So it's vital that you be familiar with the General Constitution, the judicial procedure, as well as items that are covered in the Handbook for District Superintendents, which is available to you off the minister's website. And then it's also important you get good advice. You are welcome to call Brother Bernard or myself any time of Brother John's day or night. But I also would say we established some time back a Judicial Procedure Committee specifically to give you a resource to contact beyond just the two of us. Brother Jones currently chairs it. He will until the end of the year. Those members are listed in the front of the directory. You are welcome to contact those individuals as well. I will say this. While we don't want to meddle or involve ourselves in your district beyond the level that you invite us to, it is easier for us if you have a question, if you contact somebody and find out the right answer and do it properly, than to make a mistake and then we try to fix, you're calling us to say, what do I do to fix it after the fact? So if when in doubt, please contact someone. So grievance, Article 3. The second item is a district board action that's governed in Article 4. A district board action is for a direct violation of one of the ministerial rules and obligations as found in the Constitution, Article 7, Sections 2, 7, and 8. I'm sorry that I know that off the top of my head. These are very clean-cut things. They typically do not require a complaint, which Brother Bernard's going to talk about momentarily, because there's really no facts in dispute. The classic example is a guy starts a church without permission of the district board. He either did or he didn't. And you've probably got evidence of that from social media posts or something. I mean, either you've got photos of the sign he put up. He either did or he didn't do that. There's no reason to have a complaint, investigative committee, and a trial. It's pretty evident what he did or didn't do. So those kinds of direct violations of ministerial obligation, he had somebody come in and preach for him who's under question, or he went and preached for a church that's been off limits, it's under question. He either did or he didn't. It's a yes/no question. Now, in those matters, you're encouraged. You're actually admonished to go have a private conversation with that man first. Try to resolve this without getting into the judicial procedure. Go and talk with him. He may not know that man was under question when he went and preached for him. You go and have that conversation. Now, if that doesn't resolve it, certainly you can invite him to come meet your district board informally. Just say, well, would you be willing to come talk to the district board about it? He doesn't have to. He can tell you absolutely not. And that's, he can turn down a cordial invitation. You also need to understand that in this informal conversation, if you go and sit down with him, nothing he says there can be used as evidence. If he knows that, he's not going to talk to you. So that's an off the books conversation to try to resolve it. If that doesn't work, if he won't honor just an informal invitation to meet the district board, then you can summon him. That requires an official letter. This is all spelled out in Article 4. It's sent by official notice. That's defined as how you do that. You give him a summons and you cite the specific rule or obligation he's alleged to violate. You're being summoned to meet the district board on August 10th at 2 p.m. over an alleged violation of Article 7, Section 7, Paragraph 4B. If he does not come, then you can drop him immediately for failure to comply with the summons. So it does have teeth in it when you formally summon him. But when you do that, he can bring counsel. You're encouraged to have counsel for your district board. That meeting you invite him to is called a district board inquiry. That's what it's called. You're going to converse with him. You're going to find out what's going on. And then at the close of that, if you deem he has violated that rule, you can take any action you choose as appropriate in terms of punishment. Probation, you can drop him, whatever. Please understand that he has 20 days to appeal your decision. You have to notify him of the decision by official notice. Again, that's all in Article 4. He has 20 days from the days he gets the notice to appeal it to the MAC before your discipline goes into effect. He can either appeal your decision or he can appeal the severity of your sentence to him, okay? So the first two is a grievance, conflict between ministers, a district board action when it's a violation of a rule or obligation. Let me mention just one thing. For quite some time, any allegation of conduct unbecoming to a minister could not be dealt with under Article 4. It had to have a complaint, investigative committee, all that. In the digital age we have now, there are situations where there is no question about what he did. You have printouts of the text messages. You have printouts of the emails he sent with untoward photos in it. If you have clear, and the language is in Article 4 or in the judicial procedure, clear, unambiguous evidence of what was done, then you can, in very clear-cut situations, deal with conduct unbecoming to a minister through a district board action. And that was actually held up by the MAC, I know, because it came out of Missouri when I was superintendent. You can do that if there's text, video, audio, something recorded that makes it very clear. In the world of AI, this is changing a little bit about what is convincing and clear. I get that. But if you have a situation like that where you have printouts of the text or printouts of the emails or the voicemails that you can hear that he left for somebody, you can do conduct unbecoming to a minister under Article 4 instead of having to go to the much more complicated Article 5 that Brother Bernard is going to describe to you now.
Okay. So it's a judgment call, and
You want to handle things as simply and informally as possible. And if possible, an informal conversation can resolve it, or a conversation with the district board can resolve it, or a district board action can resolve it. You want the complaint, investigation, hearing, and trial to be a last resort. And even in the case that Brother Graham mentioned, and yes, that case was a precedent, but we since amended the Constitution to make it clear. So it's not just interpretation, it's a statement. And of course, they can say, well, AI, it's not my, well, that's what they can argue when they come before the district board. It doesn't rise to the level of going to a trial. It rises to the level of, is that really your voice? And did you really send that or not? Okay, so now in the classic case that we're talking about would be an allegation of adultery. That would have to go, you'd have to have a complaint signed by two witnesses who have personal knowledge. Now, we have defined this as well, because sometimes in the distant past we've had counselors argue successfully, well, nobody saw them committing adultery, so there's not a second witness. So just the woman says it, and so, the Bible does require the amount that two or three witnesses, and don't receive an accusation against the elder except with two witnesses. So what we've interpreted that to mean is a couple things. There could be one incident with one witness and the same type of incident with another witness. So if one woman comes forward saying he committed adultery with me, and another woman says on another occasion he committed adultery with me, that's two witnesses. Because the purpose of two witnesses, it doesn't mean it's true. They could both be lying. But the purpose of a second witness is to corroborate the testimony of the first witness, to make it more likely. So you're not just taking one person's unsubstantiated word against a minister, but at least there is someone else who is verifying that. So wouldn't you agree? If one woman just says, I committed adultery with him, he says no, and there's no other evidence, we'd take the minister's word. But if a second woman says the same thing happened to me, doesn't that at least increase the likelihood or the probability? Well, that's what you're talking about. You're still not saying he's guilty. He has to go through an investigation, hearing, trial. He's got all the protections. This is just the threshold, just to get it started. So we have to have two witnesses. But if you say two eyewitnesses to the act of adultery, you probably never would have a case. And obviously that's not what we or the Bible intend. So another example would be if somebody's speaking against the articles of faith. If somebody says, well, I heard him on one occasion, and another person says, I heard him on a second occasion, well, isn't that the same violation? Yes, we would say that's two witnesses. But also, a second witness could corroborate a significant fact about the allegation. We still require personal knowledge. It can't be just, well, this woman told me, and so I'm a second witness. But let's say a woman says, yes, I committed adultery, and then someone else comes forward and say, I saw his car at her house that night, overnight. Well, wouldn't that be a second witness? It doesn't mean he's guilty. It doesn't mean they're lying. They're telling the truth. But at least it does support the testimony of the first witness. Or somebody said, well, I saw them go into a hotel room together. Or, I could tell you interesting stories of cases where, this happened. They spent the night in the hotel. And, of course, the defense testimony was nobody saw what they did. So, but, of course, it was finally proven. The woman did say, but we did not watch television.
That's true.
Yes.
Can I just
Sure.
clarify that governing language, if you're ever looking for it, about what defines two witnesses, is actually not in the JP. That's in the general board policy.
The clarification.
Clarifying language about the interpretation of what two witnesses
Well,
means is in
there
the general
is some statement. We did revise the general board. When we did the revision, there's something in there about that, I believe.
Well,
You-
there may be, it may
yeah.
be duplicated, and I know there's a general board policy that clarifies that.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm just telling you the two witnesses. So you're going to have to either have one letter with two witnesses, or you could have two letters okay. So we're not hung up on the technicality of did two witnesses sign the same letter, or did one witness submit one letter, another witness submit the other letter. In fact, the two witnesses may not even be aware of each other. So it could be two witnesses that both have the same type of testimony of wrong, or it could be the second witness can corroborate a significant fact that increases the credibility of the first witness. So anyway, that helps decide. Now, when do you want to go forward? Well, obviously, if you get if you get a complaint that's not valid, you can't just shelve it. You have to contact the witness and tell them what they would need to give to make a valid complaint. Because think about this. Obviously, we want to protect the rights of ministers. That's paramount. We do want justice to prevail. If a minister is guilty of an infraction, it needs to be dealt with. But in many cases, we're also thinking of the legality. So let me explain where legal issues come into play. We are a voluntary ministerial organization. But part of when people sign the application, they give consent to follow our guidelines. So we are within our rights to investigate someone for alleged violation. However, we've got to keep confidentiality. We can't tell the general public. And also, we have to follow our own rules. So sometimes I have to explain to witnesses. They say, well, this is too strict. I say, but that minister gave permission only according to our rules. So we can't violate our rules. I will also say if the minister resigns from the UPCI, we have to stop our investigation because now he's a private citizen. We could be guilty of libel or slander if we say something false, but we could also be guilty of invasion of privacy if we say something that's true, but of a private nature that's injurious to his character. That's why when a minister's dropped with this accusation, we say he's dropped under question. So we're not saying he's guilty. We're just saying if he ever wants to come back, he has to answer the question. And if he's committed adultery, then he can't come back. He would have to prove that he didn't commit adultery. And I would just say this also, once a minister drops, he has no rights under judicial procedure. And he has no right to be reinstated. So, in the vast majority of cases, here's what's going to happen. If there's a strong allegation, say a classic case, adultery, you go to the minister and you say, look, here are these witnesses. Now, you typically do not give them the complaint up front because there are a couple reasons why. Sometimes the minister will use that to begin intimidating witnesses. Also, if you give details, they will prepare. If you give them a copy of the complaint, they will go line by line with a great attorney and they will develop a defense against each thing. What you really want the investigative committee to be able to do is to say, brother, tell me your story. And see how his story matches the witness's story. Then you have a much better understanding. So obviously he has to know what he's been accused of or how can he defend himself. But usually, and the judicial procedure provides for this, you must tell him the nature of the complaint. But you don't have to give him the complaint at that initial stage. Now, if it goes to a formal hearing, yes, he must have the complaint because he has to defend himself and he has to have counsel and they need to know exactly every detail. So yes, if they want to challenge the date is wrong, he wasn't there on that date, they should be able to do that. But when you first talk to him, you're just trying to get a sense of how valid is this, and also sense from him, does he really want to pursue this? So what you would do is say, I've got these two women have signed a letter saying you committed adultery on such and such a date. And I just wanted to let you know, do you know these women? Do you know anything about it? What do you think? What can we do? And sometimes they will confess. And then you say, well, you turn in your card now. Or if the evidence seems overwhelming, you say, they have very strong detailed evidence. And he says, I didn't do it. I said, well, you might explain, well, this means we'll have to go to investigation. And if there really is this evidence they're saying, you'll end up in a trial. So you, your family, your church, it's going to all go through this. Are you willing and ready to do that? And so sometimes they will decide, they're trying to see if you're bluffing. And if you can present enough information to say, well, here's the person and here's when it happened and here's where it happened and they said they were on a trip with you and they said this and they said that, then many times the minister will just resign. But if he says, no, this is false, a lie, they're framing me, okay, we'll go through the process. And, we want you to be exonerated. Sometimes it's in a gray area where he'll say, well, I was there alone, but we didn't go beyond just hugging and kissing and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Sometimes it's a judgment call. And you have to decide, if I don't think we can prove it, the best thing might be, okay, why don't you sign a letter stating conduct unbecoming to a minister? We'll take this to the board. We won't drop you, but we will design a suitable probation. And that way you get a measure of justice if he's admitting he did something wrong. So it's a judgment call. Do I think I could prove to a jury this man committed adultery? Or if not, if he's willing to admit to something, maybe some probation, maybe this is God's way of giving him a second chance. I believe in the grace of God. If I can't prove it, maybe that's God's way of allowing him. I will say, in my personal experience, there may be a case or two, but the vast majority of the cases that we've done that, you would think it would be a wake-up call for the minister to say, I barely got away. I got to really get on top. But most of the time, it seems I got away. And a year later, they do it again, and this time there's evidence. Sadly, the vast majority of cases, it doesn't end well. But I still feel like, we should be as gracious as possible, and obviously we must follow the manual. And who wants to go through an arduous trial? Now, sometimes that conversation doesn't happen immediately. It happens after the investigative committee, when you have the evidence. Then you go to or if you're not the chair of the investigative committee, the chair of the investigative committee will have the conversation and say, do you really want to go through this, brother? I think this is going to go to a district board hearing. I think it's highly likely this is going to go to a trial. Do you really want to go through this? And then there might be the conversation, well, I do admit I did some things wrong, but I didn't commit adultery. Well, maybe the best thing for you to do is sign a written confession. Confession has to be in writing and signed. And then you can take it to the district board. If they have a counselor, you might even negotiate outside the board, what we think the board would give you. They would give you a year's probation where you can't preach at all, or can't preach outside your local church, or get counseling, go sit under another pastor for a year, or resign your church, whatever. So these are all options. But of course, if there is a valid complaint, you try to talk to the minister informally. If that doesn't resolve it, then you have to appoint an investigative committee. You can serve as the chair, or you can designate another member of the district board as the chair. So it might depend on the district politics. It might depend on how close you are to the minister, is whether you feel like it's appropriate for you to be to serve in that capacity or not. Let's see. But what I was going to say is, going back, I said if something doesn't meet the formal definition of a complaint, you can't just shelve it. You've got to tell the person, here's what would be required. And here's what I'm talking about, because we do have a legal obligation that may go beyond just our judicial obligation. Obviously, we have to follow our judicial procedure, and we want to. But think of it in a court setting, especially when there could be an allegation that this minister abused power in a situation. If that person files a lawsuit and our answer is, we never investigated because they didn't file a complaint that meets our technical definitions, that's not going to convince any jury that we did our duty. So we can't just drop it by saying they did not meet our technical requirements. We have to say, we asked them to, and here we told them what to do, and they refused to do it. Then we're in a better case, because we tried to help them. We tried to give them the proper guidance. In processing a complaint, we have to balance two important points. And so this can be stated to the accuser, to the accused, to the investigative committee. Number one, we take all complaints seriously. So we're not going to just throw this out. But number two, all ministers must be treated innocent until proven guilty. So if an accuser contacts you, well, I know you're just a bunch of preachers, you're just going to stick up for each other. You say, look, we take every complaint seriously. We do have a process to follow, because otherwise we can't hold a minister accountable if we don't follow our process. If we did break our process and convicted a minister, he could appeal and get off. So we have to follow our process. We take it seriously. But I will tell you, we don't start with assuming he's guilty. We have to give him all the rights of an innocent person. And the same way with the minister. He might get upset. I can't believe you're taking this rebellious, backslidden person. We say, look, we have to take all complaints seriously. If we don't, we can be liable ourselves. But the judicial procedure gives you protection. You are presumed innocent. We're going to start with a believing in you, but we have to go through the process. And if we can document that you're innocent, this is going to be absolutely in your favor, because you will be exonerated by a process instead of being subject to rumors for the rest of your ministry. So, and then we tell the investigative committee the same thing. It's not your job to whitewash it and just say, well, we're going to throw this out. But on the other hand, it's not your job to hang the guy. It's your job as best as possible to get the truth. And we have to remind ourselves, and even remind these counselors, our job is not to win. Our job is the truth. It's different from a secular process. There are some similarities, but we've deliberately designed it not to be the same, because our goal is not to win. Our goal is to get the truth. And we do have counselors. They don't have to be lawyers. They're not supposed to be compensated. Now, they can be given their travel expenses, but they're not supposed to be paid by either side, because what we're hoping is It's going to be people who want truth. It's going to be friends of the accused. It's going to be people who believe in them, fellow ministers. It can't be a secular lawyer. Now, there's a tendency to find preachers who are either lawyers or who've gone to law school, but that's not really necessarily required. And I've seen, of course, the skills that make a good lawyer can make a good counselor, but I've also seen them get tripped up because someone who's trained in the law is going to follow secular patterns sometimes that backfires on them. And I've seen district boards really reject that legal approach because they say, look, you're not trying to get the truth. You're trying to win for your client, and we reject everything you say. So I think we have to be careful in that secular model. Okay, let's see. Now, let me explain that the, let's see what we're doing on time here.
We're gonna run late, but the last part, I'm gonna cover almost
Yeah.
everything with their secretaries.
Yeah, okay. So, here's the thing. There's so much to cover, but what I wanted to say is that when there's an allegation of child abuse, that goes to a separate process. But you are involved, okay? So what happens is if there's allegation involving child abuse, there's a 3-person committee that will decide for sure. So that's you, the district superintendent, the regional presiding officer, which is the presiding officer for judicial procedure that we already have in place, and the regional judicial officer, which is specially a new role specially designed for this.
No, it's the regional.
Oh, I'm sorry, the regional executive presbyter. Right, you're right. Because the regional judicial officer comes in after the fact. So I'm sorry, it's the regional executive presbyter. So it's these 3 officers that we're familiar with: district superintendent, regional executive presbyter, and the regional presiding officer. Those 3 confer. They look at the complaint. If they say, yes, this involves a minor under 18, we send it, and here's the new officer, we send it to the regional judicial officer. At that point, your job is finished. You don't have to go through it anymore. So in a way, that's kind of a 4th procedure. It's the same. And then also, if there's a complaint against you or another general officer, then that comes and is handled by the general superintendent. So that is its own process. Yes.
In the case of the minor or the child, do
Yes.
we, in any case, go to the police? Do we have to
Yes.
call
One of the things we do is we make sure if somebody else has already reported it, but if not, we have to report it. Yes, that's stated in the policy, so you follow it. Because yes, that's a very good question. We can't just rely and say, well, we're following our procedure. We got to be sure we're following the law. So yes, when there's a case of child abuse, you handle that very carefully. You might, I would say you probably want to talk to the Judicial Procedure Committee or the Safe Church Committee to make sure you're handling it properly, because it's so, there are minefields there that you've got to be really careful to do the right thing in that. But I did want to make one more statement. So let me make it clear. So if there's a complaint, you appoint an investigative committee. The job of the investigative committee is not to determine the man is guilty. It's to determine, is there enough evidence that it needs to go to a hearing? So you might have to remind everybody of that, because sometimes the minister might get very upset, and sometimes the accusers might feel like they've won, and you have to explain, this is only, maybe to use a secular thing, it's like a grand jury. We're only saying, is there enough evidence to move this forward? Because if there's no evidence, you just drop it right there. If you don't find it credible, if you don't really find there's a corroborating witness, if the 3 investigative committee members say, I think this person's lying, and there's really no evidence to support them, they can just drop it. They can just kick it out. Now, if it goes to a hearing, that's before the district board. It's the same decision. Technically, and I know this is much more serious, but you have to remind your district board members, we're not saying the man is guilty. We're just saying, does this have to go to a trial? Is there so much evidence that if we didn't go to a trial, we would be derelict in our duty? And so you might have some people say, I think he's guilty. Some people say, I don't think he's guilty. But you say, the test is not whether you think he's guilty. Is there sufficient evidence that hasn't been refuted or ruled out, discredited? Is there sufficient evidence that this needs to go to a trial? And at that point, it's a trial of the jury of his peers. It's not the district board Okay, I will just say as a practical thing though, and maybe this is changing a little bit. I think the child abuse track is a separate track, so that relieves the district of huge problems. But historically, juries are going to be very, very reluctant to convict a fellow minister. So the classic case, the minister's accused of adultery, he gets up and says, I didn't do it. Often, let's just say he did, okay. Often the woman he's chosen is a very discreditable person anyway. And often they may have backslidden, left the church, cut their hair, wear makeup. And if the wife gets on, and I heard a counselor told me this years ago, if I can get the wife on the stand to support her husband and cry and say, please don't take his job, he's going to win. And this counselor was pretty cynical. So if I can get the wife to cry on the stand, I'll win. Well, I think we're a little bit better off than that now. But you are still facing an uphill climb. I think probably that's the right thing. That if here's a minister who's very believable, says, I didn't do it. And his wife says, I don't believe he did it. This is our livelihood. This is our ministry. This is all we know. And this woman says, well, he did it. A jury is probably going to side with the preacher. So you don't really want to go to a trial on something that the jury is not going to drop him. So like conduct coming to a minister, you don't want to go to a trial on that. Because the jury's going to say, if you don't think it's bad enough to drop him, why should we think it's bad enough to drop him? You want to handle that by district board action if you can, or by negotiation if you can. He doesn't know if he's going to win a trial, so he might negotiate. So if the evidence is not really convincing, but you think there really is a problem, try to negotiate conduct unbecoming to a minister. But obviously, if the evidence is overwhelming and points one way, you got to do what you have to do and pray and hope for the best. And we have had jury trials. We've only had two in recent years. One, the minister was found not guilty. The other minister was found guilty. And before that, it's like 20, 25 years ago. So I'm just giving you practical advice of how to deal with that. But technically, you're telling your investigative committee and your district board, we're not deciding guilt. We're deciding, is there sufficient evidence that it must go forward to the next step? Okay, Brother Green.
I would merely offer that scenario he described where it's sexual abuse and it's going to you're going to decide that it's, you meet with the executive presbyter and the regional presiding officer, and if they decide, yes, this is an abuse case, it takes it out of your district's hands. It's not Article 5 anymore, it's Article 6. They are very parallel structures. It's just Article 5 is handled at the district level up to the trial. Article 6 is handled at the regional level. So the investigative committee is not going to be, you're not going to chair it, you're not going to be involved in it. If there's a hearing, it won't go to the district board, it goes to the regional hearing committee. So when the three of you decide, no, this is an Article 6 matter, that takes it out of your district's hands, and it will all be handled at the regional level, okay?
And we trigger those other two out of our district.
If it's an accusation that you say, I believe this is sexual abuse, child
Right.
minor.
We trigger that by
You
headquarters?
call the executive presbyter, you call the regional presiding officer, and you say, we got to meet, and you lay it out to them. And the three of you decide, no, this is an Article 5 matter, it should handle the district, or yes, this is a sexual abuse matter of a minor, it's going to go to Article 6.
We
So
don't
no,
call,
you
we
don't
don't
need
call
to
you don't have to
headquarters,
call
we
us,
literally
you know.
identify it in the manual
Yeah.
and call those individuals.
And then the three of you decide, no, the three may say, no, this isn't really sexual abuse of a minor, this is Article 5 that you handle in your district, you appoint an investigative committee and you go forward with it. Or they may say it's Article 6, and then that regional judicial officer will take care of getting a regional investigative committee and a regional hearing. Let me just offer this, and I'll get there. His analogy is fine, and I should know better than to ever suggest much. He's right. We did put that in the judicial procedure. It's also still in policy. It's in both places, so I guess in that regard, maybe that's a little bit right. But anyway, I should know better.
That's a win.
I should know
That's a
better.
win.
The guy, I should know better than to say, hey, I think, and he's like, no, we put it there. Yeah, we did. No. At any rate, this is the analogy I've used that kind of made it a little clear to me in terms of these steps. Envision a scenario where a lady says, somebody snatched my purse. She's going to go to a detective. She's going to file a complaint. She's going to say somebody stole my purse. The detectives are going to look into it. They will work then with the district attorney to decide if they present it to a grand jury, the grand jury then will draft the charge. That's the point at which the guy's charged of. That's similar to us. Somebody comes to you and says, so-and-so did whatever. The investigative committee to me is kind of the detectives.
Right.
They decide then, is it going to a hearing? That's kind of the grand jury. The grand jury decides, is there a charge? Then it's turned over to the trial. The trial is not handled by your district. At the trial, your district is basically the plaintiff. And you're going to have your counsel will be making the case. But the trial is handled outside. I would offer this as well. The cost for the trial is covered by headquarters, but not your district's costs associated with it. So your travel to the site, your hotel, your meals, your witnesses' meals, whatever you cover for their travel, your counselor, his expenses, your district has to cover those expenses. Okay? Now, for all the jury and the judge and all the regional presiding officer, yes, we cover that, although we get that back from your districts, but that's another topic. But I'm just saying your individual district does not. Let me just, I think I need to cover this, or we're going to run out of time. The second book you got, or the last half of that book that talks about district operations, or whatever it says, operational procedures, I am going to cover a great deal of that with your secretaries in the district secretaries workshop on Thursday morning at 9 o'clock. That's in rooms 125 and 126. You're welcome to come. If you're a new superintendent, you'd like to come, you're welcome to come to that. And that's where I'm going to cover a lot of the things about how we handle divorces, how we handle, all that kind of stuff, procedural things. We're going to run out of time here. If you want to be there Thursday morning at 9 o'clock in rooms 125, 126, you're welcome to do that.
How about allegations of rape? Not a minor.
Well,
Does that come out of the district? Does that
no,
stay
no,
still in
that's
the
still Article 5. Yeah.
This is new with the minor deal. If this goes to an Article 6 and they find out one that they said they were minor, but at that time when it did happen they were of age, does it go back to the district?
I would say so.
Probably so.
I know,
Yeah.
I mean,
I would say
In the investigation,
it absolutely
yeah, if the
could,
investigation says no, that,
because if
they could,
if
yeah.
they did it in the procedural part, then they'd be out of step with the district.
I mean, that might be something the Judicial Procedure Committee would run away on and make a ruling on it. It would be kind of be my default position that in the regional, well, they're the ones that make rulings about what the Judicial Procedure
But there's
says.
just they're an advisory committee.
No, they are charged in the Judicial Procedure to make rulings on the Judicial. At any rate, I'm just saying.
An advisory committee to the district. They're ruling. That's what the man told me.
well, I would just say this, you're asking something that is probably not explicitly covered. So, Brother Graham is saying, so here's the scenario. It's an allegation that it was abuse of a minor. So the three-person committee sends it to Article 6. You're saying that in the course of the investigation, they say, no, it's not abuse of a minor, then I think they turn it down. They dismiss it. Then the person would have to file, or they could refer it back to the district. So I don't think we have to have a complicated scenario of interpreting the manual. I think the three-person committee the investigative committee, the investigative committee just says, no, this is not a violation of Article 6. We're kicking it out. Now, I think if they feel strongly enough that there was sexual misconduct with an adult, they could then file that as a complaint right back to the district. So I don't really think we'd have to, but to clarify, yes, the Judicial Committee, Procedure Committee is an advisory body. However, if there's a case where the General Superintendent, the General Secretary, or the Regional Presiding Officer asks for an official ruling, then that three-person committee gives an official ruling, then we will follow that. But that can be appealed to the General Board, Executive Board. So if they issue a ruling that's...
Have we rewritten the amendments this year? Because that's not how...
It's in there. It has been since they adopted that Article 9 of the Judicial Procedure.
Very rarely will we ask for an official ruling, but if we ask for official ruling, we follow it unless the Executive Board overturns it.
I just thought it said in there that they were...
Well, we actually, in your case, we did that. The Judicial Procedure Committee had a ruling, you brought it to the Executive Board, the Executive Board modified it. So we've actually done that.
I didn't bring it.
Well, I mean, whoever brought it to the Executive Board, yes.
Brother Bernard, one thing you said a moment ago that I've always been stumped by,
Okay.
You said, this man is accused of adultery with this woman. And then, but you've got another accusation over here that corroborates it. And so those are two witnesses. What do you do? What is the actual complaint? In other words, you got to have two signatures on the complaint. How do you take two separate instances and form one complaint?
Well, it can be two letters from the two different women. That is a complaint.
That would be a complaint.
Yes.
Even though they were only individually signed.
Correct.
But you put a cover letter that this is
Yeah,
one.
correct.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. I just want to mention two things here quick, and we're going to run out of time because we have an executive board meeting starting here in about 15 minutes. There are 4 ways that a credentialed minister can no longer be credentialed. Okay, 4 scenarios whereby a guy who has a card in his pocket no longer has credentials with us. Number 1, I'm going to find my list so I'll be sure I say this correct. Well, yeah, it can be dropped for non-payment of dues to headquarters. They can be dropped if they don't sign or cooperate with the biennial affirmation statement. Now, that's been modified now by the general board where all they have to do is accept their fellowship card, and that is their affirmation. So technically, that one's a little bit less grievous than it used to be in its operation. They can resign, they can turn their license in, or they can be disciplined either on the heels of a confession or being found guilty at trial. But if their license is going to be taken from them, either by discipline, either because of a Article 4 district board action because they started church without permission, you cautioned them and warned them and told them to stop and they kept having service, you take action, they either have to be found guilty in that, they have to confess, or they have to be found guilty at trial. What your board can't do is just say, well, we just took his license. If he has credentials in his pocket, he has afforded all the protections of the judicial procedure. It is much easier to deny a person a license than to take one from them once they have it. Once they have it, they have all the protections of the JP.
Yeah.
So we got into the situation a while back, some time ago in a general board meeting. I wish you could have seen the look on our faces, particularly my boss who is a trained lawyer, when districts were just saying, well, if they don't pay their budget fees, we just take them. I mean, not budget fees, our district dues. They don't pay their district dues, we just take their license. You can't do that. Well, we've done that for years, and we're like all cringing because cooperating with the district financial plan is something in Article 7, Section 7. They're required to. But you can't just say you didn't do it, so we took your license. You have to summon them. You have to call them in, formal summons. They have the right of the protection of having a counselor there. Now, because so many districts said, well, we were doing something like this, in the judicial procedure, we adopted a workaround to a certain degree. So now, if somebody doesn't cooperate with your district financial plan, you can discipline them either by formal summons, Article 4, take them through that process for Article 4 in the JP, or your district conference, not your district board, your district conference can adopt a district financial plan or district financial policy or practice or whatever you want to call it that says how you're going to enforce it, how you're going to put teeth in it. So you can adopt, because people were saying, well, you guys drop them, you don't summon them in. You know why? Because the General Conference adopted something in the Constitution saying if you don't pay, you get dropped. Yeah. Your district can adopt something in your district that says, January 1st, if you haven't paid, you give them 30 days of grace. February 1st, you're going to get dropped. You have 15 days to reinstate with it. You can frame it just like ours, but your district has to adopt it. You inform everybody. They have to have an opportunity to meet your district board. You can't deny them that right to come in if they say, I want to come in and explain. You can't turn down their payment if they try to make it. There's all these stipulations. So in the judicial procedure, it spells out the minimum criteria that your district financial policy has to have in it if you're going to enforce it in that way. Okay? So you can adopt one, but be sure you have those stipulations that are found in the JP in it. And if you do that, then you can enforce your district financial plan via your district board policy.
And let me explain this. This is very crucial. So if you have a policy, you must follow it consistently with everybody.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine.
And the other thing is you have to follow it consistently, but because we actually had a lawsuit in Texas years ago where some people, and let me give the other thing. If a person is on the dropped list, they haven't paid their dues, you can sign to have them reinstated. Okay, within a
when our drop list comes out, you'll get an email. with all the names of guys in your district that are on the drop list. They cannot reinstate. They can't call us and say, I want to pay. They can't go online and pay because we deactivated their accounts. They have to have district superintendent approval or district secretary. You're allowed to decide if your secretary can make that decision or not. But your district has to give approval. So I plead with you, when you get that email, there's this little button that says reply. And if you just click that button, you can tell us right then, these all have my approval, or everybody has my approval except Joe Dokes, I don't want him back. Because what happens is guys call us to pay, and all we can say is, we can't take your payment. Why not? Because your superintendent doesn't know where the reply button is.
But I mention this because if somebody has a complaint against them that you think is very probable and they don't pay their dues, the easiest thing in the world is don't approve them to reinstate because they're technically dropped.
Yeah.
They have no rights.
Yeah.
So don't reinstate them if you're trying to drop them through a process.
Yeah.
Okay? There is your window. And it's amazing how many preachers that are in trouble don't pay their dues. Maybe it's a symptom of their problem. But, so we give people grace, but if they've already gotten themselves in trouble, you don't have to give them grace. That's the easiest way.
Yeah.
And you can assume they probably wanted to drop that way. So don't stick them back in the system. But as I was saying, whatever you do, be consistent. Now in that case, you have discretion. But if you're going to drop a minister for not following district policy, you have to drop your son or your North American Missions Director or whatever. Or if you're going to give grace, you have to give grace across the board in the same way. Because we actually had a lawsuit in Texas. There were 2 guys dropped, and they were both under question, or they were both had a judicial procedure complaint, but they didn't pay their dues. They got dropped. Well, they sued that they were being discriminated against. Thankfully, this was under Brother Holly's tenure, but they subpoenaed all the records of the Texas district, and they found consistently everybody was reinstated if they followed, nobody was dropped if they followed the policy. And so they weren't dropped because of discrimination. They were dropped because they didn't follow the policy. So there's your safeguard. Following the policy is your safeguard.
2 of the happiest calls I've had were from 2 district superintendents when they got their drop list. And both of them had somebody on there that they said, this solved me a huge problem.
Yeah, we're out of time, but obviously we couldn't cover it all, but we wanted to hit the highlights. Hopefully you got something.
Please read those books. I know they're a little lengthy. Read that. If you have any questions about anything that's in that, call me. I'll be glad to talk with you about it. And Thursday morning, I'm going to cover a lot of the stuff I didn't cover tonight with your secretaries. You're welcome to be there.